I wasn't expecting a celebration, not after 18 years, but I also wasn't expecting a 17% pay cut in an email. Time-stamped 8:15 a.m. Subject line: compensation adjustment. No meeting. No heads up. No thank you for nearly 2 decades of silence. Cleanup and loyalty. Just numbers. Brutal. Calculated numbers. My name is Tessalene Corin. I've been the Director of Operational Ethics at Glenrock Systems for nearly 2 decades. I'm the one they called at 2 in the morning when a compliance report risked federal penalties. I'm the one who redlined every contract, flagged every risk, and whispered corrections before PR disasters could happen. I never asked for much. No flashy title, no private office, no social media profile. I believed in being the spine of the company, invisible, but essential. Yesterday, literally yesterday, my division head patted my shoulder in the elevator and said, "No one protects this place like you do, Tess." And today, that same division had CC'd me on a mass HR memo. The attached spreadsheet listed every adjustment. My name was in red. Beside it, 17% effective immediately. 2 rows down, Caden Miller, the analyst I mentored last year, got a promotion and an 11% raise. I reread the file 3 times, thinking maybe I missed a footnote. Maybe this was a reallocation, a temporary shift, a clerical mistake, but it wasn't. I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I thought about replying. I thought about asking why. I even drafted a line. Can we clarify the rationale behind the salary change? But I didn't send it. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. It wasn't the number that hurt. It was the message behind it. You don't matter anymore. They didn't just cut my salary. They sliced into the idea that loyalty, consistency, and quiet excellence would ever be enough in this place again. So I closed the spreadsheet. I didn't complain. I didn't schedule a meeting. But I felt something settle, low and heavy, in the pit of my chest. The kind of silence that doesn't come from shock, the kind that comes before a decision. The next morning, I walked into Glenrock's marble-floored lobby with the same poise I'd worn for 18 years. 7:30 a.m. Right on time. My blouse was tucked, hair smooth, and I even placed a box of blueberry muffins at the front desk. Just like I always did on Mondays. Routine is a language. It tells people, I'm fine, nothing's wrong, and I knew they'd believe it. That's the comfort of being invisible until needed. No one looks closely when you stop speaking. But inside, something had turned. I bypassed the main floor and headed straight to my office, nodding politely at a junior associate who offered a sheepish, "Good morning." I didn't stop, didn't smile. My badge beeped softly as I unlocked the door, then locked it behind me. I didn't open my email. I didn't check the calendar. Instead, I inserted a drive into my laptop. Flat, black, and unmarked. It asked for a 16-digit key and a retinal scan. Both accepted. The screen went dark for a beat, then lit up in a palette of grayscale and blue. Echo Mirror had just awakened. 5 years ago, Glenrock had faced a crisis, a government ethics investigation that nearly severed our most lucrative federal contract. I was brought in to salvage it, not just with policy memos or apology tours, but with architecture, a system that could detect risk before it exploded. I built Echo Mirror as an internal behavior scanner. It watched who approved what, how quickly decisions were made, when documentation didn't match, and most importantly, why patterns emerged where they shouldn't. When the storm passed, the board called it overkill, too invasive, too risky, they said. But they didn't ask me to delete it. They just stopped funding updates. And so, I buried it. Deep within Glenrock Systems, I maintained a ghost instance, firewalled, unreachable by any interface but mine. It hadn't been opened since the week I archived it, until now. As the dashboard came to life, I watched a familiar stream of names, timestamps, and internal flags bloom across the screen. Echo Mirror hadn't just survived, it had evolved. Without intervention, it had continued to track anomalies in executive access, non-compliant approvals, altered timestamps, even flagged shifts in passive-aggressive tone during meeting transcripts. My face remained blank. My heart didn't race. Feigned calm had become muscle memory. I scrolled through the feed, seeing names I recognized. Many I didn't. Some flagged for duplicate reimbursements, some for invisible consulting vendors. One executive had approved a conflict of interest waiver with no second signatory. Then, out of curiosity, or something deeper, I clicked on the search bar and typed, Tesseline Corin. The screen blinked. A small wheel spun, then, no entries found. I checked the filters. Time frame, full span. Categories, all. Sensitivity, max. Still nothing. In 5,000 working days. I hadn't triggered even a yellow flag. I leaned back slowly, letting the silence fill the room. The screen glowed softly in the dark. Echo Mirror had judged everyone, even the developers, the assistants, the temp workers, but not me. And yet I was the one they decided to cut. The bitterness wasn't loud. It was clean, sharp, still. Like standing beside a window during a snowstorm, watching the cold but not feeling it. I hadn't failed them. They had failed themselves. And now, they'd forgotten this mirror ever existed. I looked around the office, my name still on the glass, my certificates still framed, my shelves still holding binders I built from nothing. But now they felt distant, like souvenirs from a past that no longer claimed me. So I created a new folder, labeled it Ghost Mirror Backup 001, and dragged the entire contents of the system into it. If I was invisible to them now, I might as well become their ghost. And ghosts? They remember everything. The system remembered everything. That was the part that haunted me. Even when they'd archived it, stripped the funding, and claimed Echo Mirror was no longer in use. I'd known better. I hadn't just designed it. I had quietly protected it, maintained it, trusted it. But now, staring at my name in the search bar with no records to be found, I wondered if the memory it held went even deeper than I realized. If the system never forgets, what else has it been forced to bury? I leaned forward and opened the archive index. The one most people had never known existed. Buried beneath layers of internal changelogs and compliance updates was a string of misnamed system folders, file paths that didn't align with any modern naming convention. One folder stood out. Legacy Build Voss V13. Garrett Voss, or as we knew him, Blaine, the founder. The last CEO who ever asked me why I cared so much about ethics. 5 years ago. Garrett Blaine had stood with me in the glass-walled observatory on the 10th floor. We were reviewing Echo Mirror's early test logs when he said something I never forgot. This system will outlive both of us. Tess. The question is, will it still serve truth? Or just power? Back then, I thought he was being dramatic. He always had a poetic way of saying hard things. Garrett was the kind of leader who asked questions that slowed down meetings, questions about culture, sustainability, and human cost. He was the reason Echo Mirror ever saw daylight. When the board pressured us to roll out something flashier, less invasive, more market-friendly, he refused. And then, quietly, suddenly, he was gone. No press release, no scandal, just a 3-line email announcing his retirement. I never believed it. Opening the folder, I found a series of encrypted logs. One file was different. It was large. Audio. Its last modification date? 3 days before Garrett's exit. I decrypted it using a private key Garrett had given me, just in case, his voice from the past echoing as I entered the code. Then the recording began. 4 voices. A meeting behind closed doors. Familiar names, now high-ranking executives, speaking in clipped, Transactional tones. He won't budge on the layoffs. We spin it as early retirement. He walks with dignity. The system's too powerful in his hands. Then we cut him before he uses it on us. And then, a voice that chilled me. The current CEO. Back then, he was VP of Strategy. Blaine built a mirror. Let's make sure he doesn't have time to look into it. The room went quiet. So did I. I replayed the last 10 seconds 3 times, just to be sure I hadn't imagined it. But the words were real, immortalized in a forgotten corner of a system they thought was dead. I remembered that week. Garrett hadn't said goodbye to me. Just left a notebook in my office drawer, and a yellow sticky note. Keep your eyes open, they won't see you coming. At the time, I'd thought it was just his usual cryptic style. Now I understood. I sat still, surrounded by quiet hums of machines and fluorescent lights that hadn't flickered in years. My hands remained steady, my expression unchanged, but inside. Doubt uncoiled and crawled its way through every memory I had of this place. I had stood by, hadn't I? When Garrett disappeared? I didn't push back. I didn't ask questions. I chose silence. I chose safety. And now, 5 years later, they had used that same strategy on me. Quiet, clean, no confrontation, just a spreadsheet and a salary cut. I minimized the player and stared out the window. The skyline hadn't changed, but I had. I found the export button and created a backup file labeled, "When they erased Himwav." Not to send, not yet, but to hold, to remember, because this time, I wouldn't be silent. This time, the mirror would speak. I didn't expect to feel anything when I opened the next layer of echo mirror. After all, the system had already shown me what they did to Garrett Blaine. It had already proven my instincts right. That power didn't just corrupt Glenrock from the top, it rewrote history. But as I clicked into the flagged internal files, something deeper stirred. If they removed a man like Garrett, what were they so desperate to keep hidden? I navigated to the Behavior Flags Executives tab and began scrolling. The list was long, hundreds of data points, some marked yellow, a few red, most quietly unaddressed. I clicked on the first that caught my eye. A $46,000 wellness retreat coded under employee development. 4 names were attached, all vice presidents. The GPS logs didn't match their travel claims. They had booked a 3-day stay at a luxury resort in Sedona, Arizona. Echo Mirror had even captured shared internal photos, rented cabanas, spa treatments, cases of wine. There were no meeting notes, no schedule, not even a feedback survey. And then I saw the email. Let's call this a mental reset weekend. Make sure legal files it under wellness. Last thing we need is payroll asking questions. The thread had been deleted from the company's official archive, but Mirror had it. I copied it into a separate folder. Next. I opened another flag, this one a red alert. It showed a report modification for Glenrock's Q3 financials. The metadata revealed the file had been updated on October 10th, but the embedded timestamp was manually changed to September 30th, meaning they had backdated the report. Inside the document, the numbers conveniently painted a picture of stable growth, exactly what investors would have needed to see ahead of the earnings call. Another internal comment surfaced. We needed those numbers to look solid before the Q3 call. Nobody audits metadata anyway. I felt my fingers tense. These weren't oversights. They were calculated manipulations, designed to keep the ship looking smooth on the surface while it rotted from the inside. Still, I kept going. Echo Mirror wasn't done. A contract popped up, Crane and Partners, a consulting firm I didn't recognize. The system flagged the engagement as above industry benchmark by 278%. The deliverables were vague, the invoice history inconsistent. Then came the audio file. A voice I knew, one of the current executives, speaking during a private budget meeting. Just send it through Crane, he's family. We'll recycle the cash later through internal budgets. I froze. Crane. I opened the HR database and searched the employee profile of Leo Crane, Glenrock's current director of strategic expansion. I scrolled to the bottom, under emergency contacts and family affiliation. It was there. Philip Crane, chairman of the board, father. The bloodline was confirmed. This wasn't just about poor ethics. Glenrock had become a shell for a dynasty, a boardroom bloodline disguised as business. I didn't speak. I didn't move. But something coiled inside me, tight and steady. Not outrage, not fear. Clarity. I thought about Layla, the young analyst who got fired for questioning a missing invoice last quarter. She hadn't been wrong. She'd just stumbled into a system designed to protect itself from people like her. And people like me. All these years. I thought silence was loyalty, that discretion was professionalism. But what they really valued was complicity. I opened a new folder on my drive. Rot Layer 1. Inside it, I placed the Sedona retreat images, the backdated Q3 report, and the Crane audio file. I labeled each one carefully, not for revenge, for record. Then I leaned back, eyes still fixed on the screen, and whispered into the silence. Let's see how deep this goes. I thought I was alone. After uncovering how Glenrock's leadership had hollowed out the company from within, fake wellness trips, backdated financials, and a padded contract funneled to the chairman's son, I believed I was the only one standing on the edge of the truth, the only one with the nerve, or maybe the clarity, to look into the rot and not look away. Then my phone buzzed. It was 6:08 p.m., the office mostly empty, the building humming with that low, sterile silence it always had after hours. I glanced at the screen. Signal. A number I didn't recognize. No name, no avatar. The message was simple. You're watching, aren't you? My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't type anything. Didn't breathe for a second. No one else should know. Echo Mirror was hidden, firewalled, offline, unindexed, stored under layers of decoy programs and access keys. Even the IT department had no idea it existed. I had made sure of it. And yet someone had found me, or at least, found what I was watching. I snapped my laptop shut, then reopened it with calm fingers that didn't match the thrum in my chest. I ran a system check on Echo Mirror. No breaches, no remote access, no logins from outside devices. But something wasn't right. I moved through the code, firewalls still intact, encryption layers untouched. But I could feel it. A breath on the glass. A presence not visible in code, but undeniable in instinct. Then another message arrived. This time, it included a photo, not just any photo, but a screenshot of the exact Echo Mirror interface I was looking at 20 minutes earlier. Same layout, same files open, same file names. Rot Layer 1. In all caps. But the timestamp? It was dated 7 days before I created the folder. You're not the first to open it. I stood slowly, backed away from the desk, as if distance could protect me from the weight of what that meant. Had someone accessed the system before me? How? I had the only master key. Unless Garrett Blaine wasn't just preparing for his own erasure, he was preparing for a future he wouldn't live to see through. I opened the last note he left me, the post-it in my drawer from 5 years ago. Keep your eyes open, they won't see you coming. I had thought it meant them, but what if it meant others like me? A million questions swirled. But one truth cut through. I wasn't alone. I didn't reply to the message. Not yet. I needed to know who I was dealing with first. Instead, I opened a new decoy folder and created a file titled Board Confession Raw Move. I embedded a tracer, a light beacon program Garrett and I once used for contract testing. If someone opened the file, I'd capture the device's signature, timestamp, and IP bounce path. It wasn't a threat. It was a handshake in reverse. If this ghost wanted to be seen, they would be. 10 minutes passed. No response. I powered down and started packing up. The silence in the room was different now. Not empty, but watched. I turned off the lights, took one last glance at the blank screen, and slipped my phone into my coat pocket. Just as I stepped into the hallway, a third message came through. If you dig deeper, don't do it alone. That was it. No name, no signal trace. But this one, this final line, cut differently than the others. It wasn't a warning. It was a thread. A thread tied to someone else who had once trusted the system. Someone who may have been erased, or was still somewhere inside it. And for the first time since I opened the mirror, I felt it, not fear, not rage, but the quiet certainty that ghosts don't always come to haunt. Sometimes, they come to help. The next morning began with a hollow stillness, the kind that settles into your bones before the building fills with voices and recycled air. I arrived at 6:40 a.m., earlier than usual, hoping the silence would help me think, but I hadn't even reached my office when I saw her. Layla Monroe, 25, Finance Department, sharp mind, sharper integrity. She stood outside HR with her ID badge in one hand, a brown envelope in the other. Her posture was stiff, her lips pressed into a line like she was trying not to speak first. I paused at the end of the corridor, unseen. One of the HR reps motioned toward the elevator. Your access ends at noon. Legal will send a severance packet. Layla nodded once, silently, and walked away without a word. She didn't cry, didn't argue, but the look in her eyes, betrayal without surprise, cut deeper than any file echo mirror had ever flagged. She had known this was coming, and somehow, so had I. Back at my desk, I pulled up her employee profile in Echo Mirror. 2 warnings filed within the past 60 days. Disruptive to team morale. Insubordination. Questioning approved financial reports. I clicked deeper. One contract stood out. The same name appeared in her internal report 3 weeks ago. Crane and Partners. I remembered now. She had stopped by my office a month back. Concern on her face, voice low. Director Corin, is it normal for a consulting firm to charge triple the market rate with no project scope? I had been halfway through revising a compliance brief. Stretched thin, tired. I didn't look up. If it's cleared through strategy, let it go. She did, and now she was gone. I traced her internal escalation trail. She had flagged the contract 3 times through official channels. Echo Mirror had logged them all, even the dates when each warning was issued to her afterward. Her instincts were dead on. I followed the document metadata on the Crane and Partners file. My name appeared at the bottom. Final sign-off, Tesseline Corin. A sick heat rose in my chest. I had signed it 5 months ago. I remembered the day now. Leo Crane had walked into my office holding the folder, saying, "We need this through by end of day. It's above board, just needs your initials." He smiled like it was nothing, and I, the ever-efficient professional, didn't read past the cover sheet. The guilt hit like a weight dropped straight into my lungs. Layla had done everything right. She had noticed the red flag I ignored, and she was punished for it, because I hadn't paid attention, because I had stayed quiet. My hands hovered over the keyboard, cold but steady, for 18 years. I had told myself that following protocol was enough, that silence wasn't complicity, it was professionalism. But Garrett's voice returned to me. Ethics doesn't die from corruption, it dies from silence. And now I understood. I wasn't just a bystander, I was the ink on the contract, the absent voice in the meeting, the final signature on a lie. I opened a new folder on my drive, labeled it Mirror of the Young. Into it, I dropped every file Echo Mirror had recorded about Layla's warnings, her performance reviews, and the internal suppression trail. I added the contract, the metadata, the approval timestamps, every piece of it. And then I opened a blank document. Subject, termination of Layla Monroe, request for ethics review. I didn't know if it would save her job, But if I helped erase her voice once, I owed her a chance to be heard. No one replied to my email about Layla. Not legal, not HR, not the ethics committee I'd looped in, hoping at least one person in the chain still cared. The message sat unread. Time-stamped. Collecting digital dust like a closed door no one intended to reopen. By 10:30 a.m. I had already buried myself back in Echo Mirror, cataloging data in a folder I now called Layer 2. I was preparing to scan deeper into board-level communications when a new email appeared in my personal inbox, one not connected to Glenrock's servers. Subject: Private offer, Echo Mirror. There was no logo, no signature, just a single. Chilling line: We're interested in acquiring exclusive access to Echo Mirror. Full discretion. Name your price. My breath caught before I realized I'd even stopped breathing. I reread the line 3 times. There was no mention of what they wanted from the system, no data, no particular evidence, just exclusive access, just control. They didn't ask for proof. They didn't ask if the system was real. They already knew, for a moment. I stared at my reflection in the black of the laptop screen. Calm. Controlled. But a flicker of unease passed through me like static before a storm. I opened a secure reply window, but didn't type anything yet. Instead, I leaned back, trying to reason through the possibilities. Who were they? A private investor? A competitor of Glenrock? A buried branch of government wanting backdoor access? Or worse, one of the board members themselves? The timing was too clean. Just after Layla's termination, just after I started organizing, someone wanted the mirror not because they feared what I'd do with it, but because they feared anyone else might see it. What would they do with it? Erase it? Weaponize it? Build something more dangerous? I closed the reply draft. I needed to know what power I really had before I gave any of it away. Digging through my archived drives, I searched for the original documentation from the development phase of Echo Mirror, back when Garrett Blaine still ran the company. I found it, tucked in a compressed folder labeled EM Prototype, Phase 1. Inside, buried in pages of legal and technical schematics, was a single contract. My name was printed near the top. Teslin Corin, lead system architect. Garrett's signature was at the bottom. And near the final paragraph, a clause I hadn't read in years. Intellectual rights retained by primary architect T. Corin, unless overridden by mutual consent. But no override existed. No subsequent version. Garrett had never rescinded it. Legally, morally. And by contract, I didn't just run Echo Mirror. I owned it. It felt surreal. For years, I had seen myself as a keeper, a technician, a watcher of systems built by others. But in this one instance, in this one thing, I was the origin. And now, someone wanted to buy it from me like it was just another digital asset. Like truth could be transacted, transferred, controlled. I sat still for a long time, not because I didn't know what to do, but because for the first time in this entire mess, I saw the full shape of the choice ahead of me. I could sell it, I could name a price, walk away, disappear. After all, what had loyalty bought me? A pay cut, isolation, the erasure of a young woman who tried to do the right thing. But the mirror wasn't just data. It was memory. It was ours. Mine and Garrett's and Layla's, and every name buried in the warnings no one wanted to read. I printed the contract and folded it neatly into thirds, tucking it into my coat pocket like a relic. Then I opened a blank email reply. Hands steady, but still unwilling to press send. I typed one line, then saved it as a draft. If I give you the mirror, who do you plan to show it to? I closed the lid of my laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if it held the answer. Because maybe the real question wasn't what they'd do with it. Maybe the real question was what I would become if I let it go. The 11th floor conference room had always been a quiet place. Back when Garrett Blaine was still CEO. He used to call it the decision room. Not because policies were made there, but because he believed hard choices needed space, not spreadsheets, not groupthink, just silence. That morning, I found myself back in that same room, alone. The lights were half dimmed, the blinds pulled just enough to cast thin shadows across the polished table. I laid my printed copy of the Echo Mirror ownership clause in front of me like it was a confession. I hadn't replied to the offer yet. The investors, whoever they were still waiting. What they wanted was simple, full, exclusive control, no questions, no oversight, just the system and everything in it. And in this room, in this moment, I was supposed to decide. I ran through both futures in my mind. If I sold it, the truth might never see the light of day. It would be buried under legal language and private servers, wrapped in a non-disclosure tomb I'd never be allowed to open again. I would walk away with money, leverage, maybe even peace, but hundreds could lose their jobs. Good people would be collateral damage. Layla, others like her, people who still believed ethics wasn't just a word we stapled to a mission statement. If I kept it, I'd be declaring war on my company, on my colleagues, on everything I helped build. And if I failed, I'd lose not only my job, but my ability to work in the industry ever again. The weight of both options sat heavy in my chest, and underneath it all was the silence, thicker than ever. I opened Echo Mirror again, scanning for clarity, for a sign. That's when I saw it. A flagged recording buried in a section labeled Off-Calendar Logs. It wasn't part of the regular meeting structure. It had no attendees listed, just a timestamp from 3 months ago. I hit play. What if she finds it again? Leo Crane's voice, quiet, uneasy. Then came the response. Tessaline's loyal, she won't flip. The CEO, calm, certain. Another pause, then a low chuckle. She's like insulation, absorbs everything, leaks nothing. I sat perfectly still, headphones pressed to my ears, pulse ringing in the silence. They didn't see me as a threat, not even as a person, just containment, something to buffer their mess from exposure. I didn't cry, I didn't break, but something inside me shifted, slowly, and then, all at once. They had built an empire on the assumption that I would always stay silent, always protect, always comply. And for nearly 2 decades, I had absorbed, I had defended, I had rationalized, but I wasn't insulation, I was a mirror, and I was done being passive. I folded the ownership document into thirds and slid it into my coat pocket. Not as leverage, as proof. I didn't need to prove anything to them, but I needed to remember that I held more than information. I held the right to act. Back at my laptop, I opened the draft email to the unknown buyers. I reread the line I'd typed before. If I give you the mirror, who do you plan to show it to? This time, I added another sentence. And if I don't sell, would you help me show it instead? I saved the draft, still not ready to send, but it was no longer a question of if, it was about how. As I packed up to leave the conference room, I played the recording again, one last time. She won't flip. I slipped in my earbuds and whispered into the stillness. You were wrong. Chicago greeted me with wind that cut through my coat like paper. It was early, 9:15 a.m., and the city felt still, like it hadn't decided whether to wake up or stay quiet. The black town car that met me at the airport didn't display a company name. The driver never asked for my name. He simply nodded, opened the back door, and drove. I didn't ask questions either. The building we arrived at wasn't tall or flashy. It was tucked into a quiet block near the river, with stone walls and frosted glass. A man in a charcoal suit met me in the lobby. He gave a tight smile, asked for no ID, and led me to a private elevator. As the doors closed, I glanced at my reflection in the polished steel. My expression didn't betray much, at least not to others. But inside, I wasn't just composed, I was ready. The conference room was stark, minimalist glass walls, no logos. Two people waited, lawyers, based on the folders and the way they didn't introduce themselves by name. One older, one younger, both dressed in tailored black. No one offered coffee. I didn't ask. A thick folder was already placed neatly on the table before me. This document outlines full acquisition of the Echo Mirror intellectual property, source code, and all archived data. The older man began. If you sign, the transfer is immediate. All terms are confidential and binding. I sat down, opened the folder, and flipped through the pages slowly. The offer was real. The numbers weren't insulting. And there it was, my name on the registration documents, recognized as the original architect and primary IP holder, courtesy of a clause Blaine had insisted on 5 years ago. One I'd forgotten until now, one they clearly hadn't. I didn't respond immediately. I looked up. I'd like to meet the buyer before I sign anything. A pause. The lawyers exchanged glances, as if this part wasn't standard. The older one finally gave a single nod and stepped outside. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was loaded. A held breath. A prelude. Then the door opened again, and the man who entered made time feel like it folded inward. Garrett Blaine. He looked different, older, naturally, thinner. His once black hair had gone mostly gray at the temples, and the sharpness in his posture had softened, but his eyes, steady, unreadable, were exactly as I remembered. He closed the door behind him and took a seat across from me. He didn't offer a handshake. I didn't expect you to keep it alive, he said calmly, but I hoped you would. I didn't blink. You're the buyer. He nodded. After they erased me, I went quiet, built something new, waited. For revenge? For truth. His voice didn't waver. They've been using your system to suppress internal dissent and bury fraud. But that's not the worst of it. He slid a document across the table. Preliminary blueprints. Plans to evolve Echo Mirror into a commercial behavior tracking product. One that monitored employees beyond work hours. Financial patterns. Personal habits. Emotional triggers. They're turning it into a compliance weapon, he said. I stared at the page. And you want to stop it. I want to restore what we built it to be, a system that holds the powerful accountable. I studied his face. And you? Are you still that person? He didn't flinch. No, I've changed. But so have you. I leaned back, keeping my voice even. They thought I was loyal, that I'd never flip. I know. He looked at me fully now. I heard that recording. Of course he had. For a moment. Neither of us spoke. The past, the trust, the silence, the betrayal sat thick between us. Finally, I closed the folder and pushed it gently back across the table. You can have it, I said, but not like this. His brows lifted slightly. If we're going to expose them, I continued, we start with Layla, and we do it my way. He nodded once. No smile, just understanding. And for the first time in years, I wasn't following. I was leading. The morning air in Chicago was brittle, like everything around me could crack with the wrong kind of pressure. I sat by the hotel window, watching the city start to stir, taxis blinking into intersections, people walking briskly with coffee cups and collars upturned. My hand trembled slightly as I lifted the small USB drive from the nightstand. Inside it was everything. The ownership document, the source code, the original protocol designs, and the kill key. 6 lines of code, typed in the right sequence. They would disable Echo Mirror forever. No backups, no recovery. I hadn't used it in 6 years, but I never forgot it existed. That morning, I dressed with deliberate precision. Black pantsuit, no jewelry, pale blouse buttoned to the collar, not to impress. To anchor myself, to remind myself that I wasn't here to sell a product. I was here to make a decision I'd have to live with. The boardroom was already set. Same lawyers from yesterday. Same thick contract folder. This time neatly tabbed and finalized. Garrett Blaine stood near the window, hands in his pockets, eyes watching the river below like it had something to say. He turned as I entered. Ready? I nodded, but didn't sit. There's one more clause I want added. The younger lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The older one raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Blaine didn't move. I took a folded sheet from my coat pocket and slid it across the table. Clause 12.3. Absolute shutdown authority. In the event echo mirror is used to surveil, suppress, or manipulate individuals without their knowledge or consent. The original architect, Tesselaine Corin, reserves the unilateral right to disable the system permanently and irreversibly. The room held its breath. Even the city noise beyond the windows seemed to pause. The older lawyer finally spoke. That's unusual, one-sided, open-ended. It's necessary, I said. You want me to sign over a system that tracks behavior, flags internal risk, and archives private conversations if it's ever turned into a tool for control instead of accountability. I want the power to end it. No board vote, no legal battles, just me and 6 keystrokes. Blaine finally stepped forward. He picked up the paper, read it twice, and then looked at me with a hint of something I hadn't seen since he left Glen Rock. Respect tinged with remorse. You still remember the shutdown command? Every line. He nodded slowly. You were always the only one who understood the mirror wasn't just tech. It was moral scaffolding. I forgot that once. I won't again. The older lawyer looked at him. Waiting. Blaine gave a small nod. Include it. She keeps the kill key. I sat down. Only then, noticing how tight my jaw had been. One of the lawyers scribbled a quick handwritten amendment, and the clause was added at the bottom of the final page. Blaine signed first, a clean, unflinching signature. Then he passed the folder to me. I read the last page again. Eyes fixed on clause 12.3. My hand still shook as I reached for the pen, but not from fear. From the weight of choosing not just to act, but to act consciously, with conditions. I signed. As I pushed the folder back toward the lawyer, Blaine spoke again. You've changed. I met his gaze. We all have, but only some of us are willing to admit it. He gave a faint smile. What will you do next? I stood, slipping the USB into my coat pocket like it was a compass, not a weapon. I'll start with Layla, I said. And then, I'll show the mirror what it was always meant to reflect. As I walked down the hallway and out into the cold sunlight, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt stable, like standing on a bridge I had built myself, over waters I used to drown in. I didn't just license the system, I licensed my conscience. 1 week later, the first crack appeared on the front page of a major finance outlet. $46 million deal canceled amid ethics review at Glen Rock. The headline read, underneath it, a photo of the Glen Rock headquarters sat cold and gray, flanked by a brief quote from the company's legal team. We are cooperating fully with federal investigators. By the end of the day, 2 more clients had pulled out. By Thursday, the CEO had resigned. And by Friday morning, a congressional oversight committee announced a full-scale federal investigation into Glen Rock's accounting practices, internal controls, and use of behavioral surveillance software. But the most surprising part? I hadn't made a single move. No data sent, no press contacted, no whistle blown. I watched the empire fold from the porch of a quiet rental cabin outside Missoula, Montana. It was cold, and the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and pine. I kept my phone face down most of the time, only flipping it over to scan headlines, not messages. At first, I thought it was Blaine. He had the access, the history, the motivation. But something didn't sit right. The language in the disclosures was gentler. The way a person talks when they still want to be understood, not just proven right. Then, on Saturday morning, it clicked. The name buried in the article was short, almost easy to miss. The initial document was submitted by a former Glenrock Jr. analyst, Layla S. I read it twice. My breath caught. Layla. I closed my eyes and let the moment settle. The wind whistled gently through the pines. A raven called once in the distance, then flew off. The memory returned, unspooling slowly, my last day in Chicago. I had asked Layla to meet me near Union Station. She'd assumed it was for closure. An apology. Maybe. I handed her a plain black USB drive. No instructions, no pressure, just a note taped to the outside. You saw the truth once. This time, don't look away. She'd looked confused, then wary. Why me? She asked. I had smiled gently, because it shouldn't always be the oldest voice that makes the loudest noise. She didn't say anything else, just nodded, and walked away. Now I knew what she had done with it. The file she leaked was named mirrorseedredacted.pdf. It included just enough falsified budgets, edited timestamps, ghost vendor invoices, and a spreadsheet labeled Wellness, Trips, Vias, Actual Locations, CSV. But the most damning line came from a chat transcript, dated 7 months earlier. Leo Crane 86. As long as Tesseline doesn't notice, we're fine. Exec sucks ash. She doesn't ask questions anymore. Leo Crane 86. Good. Keep her tired. There it was. Power, at its most arrogant, and silence. Once again used as a weapon. Only this time, someone had spoken. Layla's testimony was brief but pointed. In her interview with the Ethics Committee, she said, I didn't act out of revenge. I acted because when truth is ignored long enough, it becomes poison. That line was quoted in nearly every article the next day. I sat with it for a long time. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. What I felt, quietly, deeply, was release. For years, I had carried the weight of that system, every function, every flaw, every compromise. I'd built it to protect truth, then watched it be distorted and buried. And though I tried to fix it, to reclaim it, a part of me always wondered if I'd done enough. Now I knew. The mirror didn't need to be mine to matter. It needed to be seen. And it had been. By someone brave enough to do what I once couldn't. That night, as the sky turned from gray to ink, I stood on the porch, a steaming mug of chamomile in my hands. I watched the stars emerge, one by one. There were no sirens, no dramatic music, no sweeping declarations. Just the sound of the wind, just the peace of knowing that silence, when finally broken, can echo farther than any scream. Sometimes, to change the system, you don't have to be the one to burn it down. You just have to light the match and hand it to someone who still remembers what fire feels like. Some choices feel loud, others feel like breathing. When the official email came through offering me a return to Glenrock, senior ethics officer, full control of compliance, triple salary, I stared at it in silence for almost a full hour. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I finally did. Then I clicked delete. No reply. No regret. I had lived too long in systems built on rot, on favors owed and truths twisted until they looked respectable. I knew what power felt like when it had no soul, and I knew I didn't want it anymore. Instead, I made tea. Outside, the fog rolled in low along the ridgeline, casting the town below in a muted silver hush. Montana mornings were always quiet, but this one felt especially still, like the world was giving me a moment before I began again. In the days since the collapse, my name hadn't appeared once in the press. Layla had become the face of reform. Blaine, the architect of accountability. Glenrock, a case study in collapse. But the mirror never reflected just one person. and I had never needed credit. I just needed it to end. Before I shut the system down, I locked it into observer mode. No more changes, no more additions, just an archive of what was done, and by whom. I encrypted it under 3 levels of security, one held by the purchasing entity, one held by the Federal Oversight Group, and one buried in a clause that required written consent from the architect of record. Me. But I wouldn't return to manage it. That wasn't my calling anymore. I began writing instead, not a memoir, not a tell-all exposé, but a curriculum. I called it Systems of Power and Internal Ethics, and uploaded the first lesson onto a small, independent education platform under the name E.K. Loren. No headshot, no credentials, just words, carefully placed, from someone who had been inside too long not to speak. My students came slowly at first. A few auditors, a quiet compliance officer from Missouri, a young engineer from Bangalore. Then, a message in the inbox. This feels real, followed by dozens more. When I recorded the first full-length lecture, I wore no makeup, no blazer, just a soft gray sweater, and the calm of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. The video opened not with a title, but with a single spoken sentence. What you build will always remember who you are, so build carefully. Then I talked, not about revenge, not about collapse, but about conscience and fatigue, and the subtle erosion of values when no one is watching. I spoke of systems not as enemies, but as reflections of their creators. I spoke of echo mirror, never by name, only by metaphor. And I spoke of choices. Midway through the lecture, I saw a name pop up in the live comments, Laylas. She didn't type anything, just stayed. And somehow, that felt more powerful than applause. Now, most days, I teach quietly from my cabin. The books on my shelves are mostly worn. My mug is chipped. I walk the same trail every morning with my coat zipped tight and no need to look behind me. I don't know what Glenrock will become. I don't know what Blaine plans to build next. But I know what I won't do. I won't go back. Because sometimes, survival is not enough. Sometimes, peace is the most radical outcome of all. And when peace finally arrives, you'll know. It doesn't demand. It doesn't shout. It just sits beside you and says, "You're done now. You did what you could." So here I am, still building, still remembering. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of the quiet strength you carry, or the systems you once questioned, don't keep that reflection to yourself. Leave a comment below. Like the video. Share it with someone who's still figuring out when to speak, or when to walk away. And if you believe in stories that uncover truth, expose injustice, and honor resilience, subscribe. We have more stories to tell.